smoke's removed, my body's been abused, my soul is watching you. My sisters, we have come, the old and ancient ones, return to bring anew. We won't go in your flame, no, none of us will hang. Our voices we reclaim. The burnt witches come, gather everyone, and hear what we to say. Welcome to Burnt Witches, a limited series podcast where history rises from the ashes and comes back to you in a modern way. Here we discuss all things labeled magic, esoteric, spiritual, or the modern broad label woo. Looking to dispel myths, we will meet brave souls who came here to help, heal, and educate. But first, a step back in time with a few facts. You know, stories and fables of witchcraft and sorcery has been interwoven into the fabric of human history since the beginning of mankind. From mysticism in Mesopotamia, where you can see it inscribed in a stone stela dating 18th century BCE, condemning those who practice sorcery to be drowned in a river, to the hieroglyphics in Egypt depicting a force that people called Heka, a force we would call magic. Heka was rumored to have been created by Ra, the sun god. In this magical force, Heka could be called on by anyone, from the priests to the common people. Priests would often use spells, amulets, or charms to bring relief to the people who were suffering. These charms and spells could also be seen in the form of tattoos. So magic, or what we might call witchcraft today, has been a part of the culture and society for thousands and thousands of years. And like all things used by man, it has the power to be used for good, the light, or the bad, the dark. It is when religion, medicine, science, and philosophy begin to swirl in mysticism. It is when the logic mind mixes with faith and belief that those in power, or those who crave power and control, begin to add drops of fear to things the logical mind cannot explain. That is when man and societies turn against the magic. This show is dedicated to all the people, men and women, dating back to 8000 BCE, who dared to bring a little magic, who use the gifts all humans possess, who use intuition, the mind, the energy body, the stars, the land, the herbs to create healing, to aid in times of stress and discomfort, to bring souls a connection to the past of ancient ways. This show is dedicated to all those men and women who perished in the flames or a hangman's noose for trying to bring a little magic to this earth. And now I want to welcome one of those brave souls, a woman I am proud to call a friend and a colleague. You can find her on the Travel Channel or wowing crowds of people with her evidential mediumship. I welcome psychic medium and folklore storyteller extraordinaire, Andrea St. Amand. Andrea, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you for having me on here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I heard that you actually have a story that you would love to share. Now, for all those listeners at home, Andrea and I actually used to live in the same town. And so she has a beautiful story that she would like to share from Charleston.
A historical story from Charleston, South Carolina. So let's start with witches there. A lot of people think that witches only existed in the United States in Salem, but they actually exist in a lot of places. And there is some rumor, I don't think it's historically proven, that a lot of the women up in the Northeast and around the Salem area, once they began to realize that they were going to be persecuted for witchcraft, whether they were practicing or not, that did influence a bit of a migration south. And so you have new religious communities or new healer communities that were of all different faiths coming to South Carolina, because South Carolina was the only colony that had written into its constitutional charter a guaranteed freedom of religion. So you didn't have to be Protestant, you didn't have to be Catholic, you could be anything you wanted.
Wow, I did not know that. Do you think that's because
That's
it was
pretty
it was
cool.
a major port of entry?
I think it's because they needed people to populate the colony that weren't just criminals sent over from England. Actually, I gotta take that back. You could do anything, but they did not want you to be Catholic. So I got to take out the Catholic part. They still considered Catholics worse than witches. So you could practice witchcraft, though. It was guaranteed you were okay. That was in the charter. However, that was not true in practice. So witchcraft was one of those laws on the books, and we followed the laws of England back there in the colonial times. It was one of those laws on the books that would have only been enforced when they felt like enforcing it. So the story I'm going to start off with is a story of a woman who probably was working somewhere in the South Abroad area. For people who understand the Charleston geography, it's on the peninsula. It's the oldest part of town. It's the most beautiful, most European looking, with all the old, beautiful houses. There was a man, and probably many men like this, who were having their way with the maids in the houses or the servants. But there's one man in particular who got a new maid. And so he was done with his old maid and done having her do sexual favors. Now, I got to say, it's hard to tell. Maybe they were having a love affair, a true love affair. It might not have been completely lopsided in terms of power. Who knows? But the result is that he threw her out. He said, I'm done with you. I got a younger, newer model in. You're gone. She said to him, fine, but you have to give me a reference for a new job, or you have to find me a new job. You can't just throw me out on the street. And he didn't like that level of impertinence. So he said, I can do whatever I want with you. You're done, you little hussy. She said, oh, no. If you throw me out without finding me a new job, I am going to tell everybody in town what's going on in this household and how you're treating the servants and the staff in terms of the sexual affairs. So part of him, you would think that's probably a common practice in the households, but it would have been an unspoken practice because none of the wives would have wanted to be embarrassed. And certainly no one wanted to encourage the working class to speak up against the ruling class. So this woman was doing something very brave by saying, I'm going to tell everybody, I'm going to run my mouth and tell them what's going on here. And you're never going to get staff again unless you do right by us. So the man was fairly threatened by her. And he goes to his friend, Judge Trott. And he says, Judge, what are we going to do to shut up this lady? Because she's actually threatening me. So you got to think this is the first woman that we know of in history who's standing up for herself as a woman, as for like her rights. Pretty amazing. Judge Trott, guess what he does? He pulls out the old law book and he turns to W, witchcraft. Now, witchcraft back then had two counts. Witchcraft in the first degree meant you could not use sorcery or charms or enchantment to kill a man, harm a man, or disfigure a man. Witchcraft in the second degree meant you could not use witchcraft or sorcery to find buried treasure, to kill someone's cattle, or to elicit unwanted affection. So the judge says, we got her. I am sure that you did not mean anything that you did with that young woman. You could not help her. She seduced you. She was making your tea and your soup, and she must have poisoned you with some sort of enchantment. And you couldn't help being seduced by this witch. So we're going to bring her up for witchcraft charges. Sure enough, they go get her. They go throw her in the dungeon. She, of course, is proclaiming loudly. Now she has nothing to lose. She's telling her story to everybody, and she is saying, you know what you are doing is wrong. You know that I am telling the truth. And she started she actually probably started losing her mind, because being in jail, in the dungeon, in those conditions, in those times would have been horrific. So she threw a curse on the judge. Now, she goes to trial. She still proclaims her innocence. The judge we have in record is a 20-page instruction to the jury telling them that they must convict her of witchcraft. So you have a jury of men, hardly a fair trial, and 20 pages telling them all the ways they can find her guilty of witchcraft, and probably scaring them too, thinking this is going to happen to you too with your servant girls if you don't make an example out of this lady. So of course they find her guilty, and she's sentenced to death. Now there is some discrepancy of whether she was sentenced to death by hanging or whether she was sentenced to burn. We do have another order from that exact same time period where another woman was brought up on similar charges, but also brought up with 2 men. The men in that order were sentenced to death by hanging, and the woman was sentenced to burn. And there's don't know why that difference would be. Certainly, I would think hanging would be the preferable death. So there is reason to believe that she would have been sentenced to death by burning. So she's taken to her sentence to death. She looks at the judge, because the judge who's the one who sentenced her to death has to be the eyewitness that says, yes, that is the woman who appeared in my courtroom. Yes, she's convicted of witchcraft. And yes, I sentenced her to death. She looked at him, and once again, she repeated, you know, I'm innocent. You know, I've done nothing wrong. And I hereby curse you. You will die choking on your own blood. Sure enough, how does Judge Trott die? Many years later, he gets tuberculosis, and he ends up in his own bed, choking on his own blood. Vengeance, I guess, a little bit, but a little too late for Our Lady. Her name, she carried the name Elizabeth and Mary, and I can't remember right now if it was Mary Elizabeth or Elizabeth Mary. She was also part of the Ford family. And after she died, every generation in her family named a woman after her. So to this day, you have her name, her story, and her legacy coming down through the generations to remember that she stood up for herself, she stood up for the truth, and it took her all the way to a horrible death.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that story. You know, it's interesting because a lot of historians have led us to believe that nobody in the States burned. That
Were
was
actually burned.
Yeah, that was only a European practice.
And I have heard that, but we actually have an order, and I have it here in front of me, where there is an order sentencing another woman within that same time period to death by burning.
And there you go.
We don't know.
Yeah. You know, they always say, you know, there's 2 sides of every single story, and the same goes for history.
Absolutely. It's written by those in power.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, there is that the meme that's been going around of saying, you know, why are we believing history from the people who burnt the witches?
Right. You know, I believe in the power of ghost stories and legends, and they're not just for entertainment, although there's nothing wrong with anything being just for entertainment, because it gets you in your imagination and starts you thinking about things in a different way. But I believe that ghost stories and legends stick around for a reason. There's a reason legends and lore stick around, and it's until the truth can come out, until we can get to a certain part in our own history that truth can out and be told with respect and honor for those who came before us. And so we then know that we have a duty to keep pushing our edges, and we have to keep speaking out when it's appropriate and how it's appropriate.
Yeah, absolutely.
To the best of our abilities.
Absolutely. So I'll share with the audience, the office that I'm practicing and working out of now used to be yours. And that office just happens to be right off Broad Street, just 2 blocks away from that very dungeon that you were discussing. Yes. And for everyone at home, I actually had to move recording this podcast back to my house. I was trying to record these out of the office. And every time I would mention the word the witches or witch, all of my Wi-Fi would go out.
And the Wi-Fi's never gone out in there. It's such a strong, it's such a strong Wi-Fi. You still have all of those old white men hanging around trying to shut you down. Judge Trot is still like right there, being like, "Don't tell this story. It's not good for my legacy."
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, for one of them, I was even I had prepped everything for the recording and I just walked out of the room and I heard a crash and I came back in and my camera and my speaker were 2 feet away from my computer on the ground.
Oh God, Lord.
Yeah. So, but we will never be silenced. We will continue to share these stories and share their voices, and we continue to share our voices. Now, you mentioned that her bloodline, everyone was named. I would like to go back to you and your abilities. You are a very gifted psychic medium.
Oh, thank
And
you.
I would love, is this an inherited ability? Does this follow in your bloodline?
Actually, it does, but it's not something I learned until way later in life, and I had to come to it my own. And then on my dad's side of the family, it comes from that side. My dad's like, "Oh yeah, you didn't know this?" I'm like, "No, why would you let me struggle thinking I was a paranoid schizophrenic my whole life? Why didn't you just tell me this is normal?" Though, I think maybe we all have to find our own truth. And I will tell you, it is much easier. This just came to me. It is so much easier for us to tell other people's stories, even though they need to be told, than it is to come into our own and tell our own stories, or to live our own life, find out what that, because our story is not yet written. And
Yeah.
so I do think in learning other people's stories, we find like, who am I? What resonates? What doesn't resonate? How am I going to express my gifts? And most of us think that our gifts are our curse, or most of us, the thing we're gifted with is the very thing we take for granted.
Yeah.
Like for you, your voice. Like, I know you've worked on developing your voice, but there's still a part of you that might just take your pipes for granted. I don't know. I don't think you do, but because I don't have that. So I've got like, oh my God, if I could only sing, but I've got other things I need to be focused on, I guess. But I think that's true for everybody.
Yeah.
And I think the very thing that needs to come out of us is, for whatever reason, going to be the thing that's the hard way to express. It's going to be the thing that comes very natural to us. Like, mediumship is very natural to me, and yet coming out as a medium, practicing as a medium, making that a career, I had to do all the personal work of stepping outside of fear. A lot of fear to work through there. That had nothing to do with connecting with the spirit world. It was fear of my fellow human beings and judgment.
Where do you think that fear just resides in this current lifetime, or do you think there could be some soul memory with that fear?
It has to be a soul memory, but it's hard to tell. I don't have a specific soul memory. I have a lot of specific soul memories of other things, but not one specifically of being persecuted and judged, although that is like the biggest fear that I have come to conquer over and over and over again in this lifetime. And it started really early on. And I started like being bullied as a little kid. And so there's something there. If it's starting that early, what did I do to attract that? And I'm not saying kids attract bad things to them. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm just wondering if there was some higher part of me that was like, okay, you need to deal with this time. You need to deal with this judgment and persecution and people trying to keep you down and keep you small and not keep you from being a creative big presence. You're going to have to work through that your entire life.
Yeah. I was with one client, and they is also very gifted in terms of mediumship, and she has all of her abilities are awake and aware within her. But there's still that level of fear. that still resides there. And we explored, and I went into her Akashic records, which is where all, our past lives are stored. And I saw a lifetime over in England, and it looked to be the early 1700s, mid 1700s. And she actually was an affluent woman, her husband well to know and known in society. And I saw her husband leaving, walking out of their beautiful brownstone, walking out and going to work. And then her friends would come over, and she would go down under the steps, and it was a very
Mm.
secret life. And she was
Yeah.
tapping in and have had all these abilities, but a constant fear my husband can never find
To
out,
find out.
will be cast out of
Yes.
high society. But again,
Yes.
everybody wanted it. All
Yeah.
the women from high society showed up to her house. These were her friends, and she was well
Yes.
respected amongst all of the women. And they all collectively kept it from her husband for all of
Mm.
those years. And so there's that aspect of, I can't be found out. I can't be found out. And it's replaying in this lifetime.
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
In finding her voice. And you're a historian, and I love that so much about you. And I love looking at history too. And it's just this record that has been replayed and replayed and replayed. And
Right.
it's always
Oh,
always a gift that's so admired and sought out in the beginning. Kings and queens and pharaohs, they all would have, even US presidents.
yeah.
Ronald Reagan had his own full-time astrologist.
Astrologer. Yeah.
Astrologer, yes. And for those people who didn't know at home, before he would do any public speaking or any announcements, he would check with his astrologist for which date and what time to announce those.
Hmm.
And so this has always been there. But then there's something in the middle that all of a sudden, whoop, and then just turn on it on a dime.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that word fear starts creeping in. Fear of somebody gaining too much power, gaining too much notoriety, gaining too much wealth.
The one thing that's come up to me, and this just came up with me, last week, I shared this with you, and
Mhm.
this is another face of that, is I got an opportunity to do something that was a little bit off the beaten track. Now, heck, isn't everything we do off the beaten track, but apparently this one was. And the first person I shared it with fearmongered me and
Yeah.
shamed me and said, "Oh, if you do that, you're going to get laughed off stage." That wasn't the exact words, but that was the energy of it. And that's the third time that's happened to me. Once was before I went on Travel Channel, which ended up being a phenomenal experience. I was a paranormal expert on Travel Channel for an entire series. The production staff was amazing. The script was phenomenal. It was somewhat scripted, but they let me say anything that I needed to say. But I was fearmongered before that, being told they're going to make you look bad, blah, blah, blah. Same with another television appearance I did. And then same again with this particular opportunity. And it's something that was really lighting my heart on fire. Something I thought it was going to be just fun for crying out loud. And the first response was, "Are you sure you want to do that?
Yeah.
They're going to laugh at you." Like,
Yeah.
wow. Wow. And I had to think, like, okay, at this point in my life, do I care? But there's that fear again, that fear of judgment, that somehow if we do the thing our heart desires, if we speak out, if we try something different, that we're going to get judged and laughed at. And therefore there's danger in that. I think we are all carrying that society will shun us, or our group will shun us, our tribe will shun us. And that means we're not going to survive. We won't get food. We won't get shelter. We'll be left out in the cold. I think that's something we carry with us in our reptilian part of our brain, that we need to recognize that is instinct, but that is not intuition that is guiding us forward into our next evolutionary role.
Yes.
But it's not easy.
It is not.
Not easy, even when you have a ton of support. So for our listeners, I actually used to practice law for 10 years. And I had a huge fear of stepping out to my law community as a psychic medium. Now, there's certain people who still think I'm a wackadoodle flake. Who cares? Whatever. But for the most part, the people who knew me were like, "Oh yeah, that kind of makes sense." We're super interested and supportive.
Mhm. It's fabulous. I've had somewhat of a similar journey when you're stepping into this work. And you know what's pushed me the most in this, in the psychic mediumship realm, in the healing world, is not people who are physically here.
Mm,
It's my bloodline that
mm,
is in spirit, living spirit. I'm going to
yep.
emphasize everyone at home, there
Hmm.
is no such thing as death.
Right.
Living spirit coming to me and saying, finally, someone in our bloodline is doing something with these abilities. Finally, thank you. And they offer so much support from their side of the veil in doing this work. And you know what? And so whenever I start to encounter some of that pushback from those in our physical world or my prior years in this life, I used to work in television as a producer, and um, I think of my ancestors, my past loved ones who are behind my back, and I can't let them down.
It's the I can't let them down. That part, I just got chills right now. That's the thing that keeps me going. It's me. So I actually met who I think is my higher self, my older
Mhm.
self, in some time loop weird thing one night when I was 18. And I don't remember what she said, but there was a download of information, and I could see this old lady smiling. And I knew I could see where she lived. I saw all of that. And I always think about that, like, how am I going to get there? And if I'm lying on my deathbed, am I going to regret not pushing my edges? Am I going to regret holding back and not having an experience? And I always get the answers yes. I will let myself down. I will let my future self down, my higher soul. And then yes, all of the support of everybody around us in the spirit world, I think they're very understanding of our decisions and non-judgmental. And yet there's that same feeling of like, I can't let this team down. They have worked too hard to get me here. And I can't let myself down, because I honestly, I don't want to come back and have to repeat the exact same life I've just done right now, just because I left something on the table because I chose mediocrity instead of the best version of myself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I do believe I think I shared a meme with you recently, and it said your higher calling wasn't a conference call. So why are you listening to other people's opinions?
Right. Take their support and move on. And I
Yeah.
will say, just to our listeners, there's a lot of support out there,
There's a
you
lot of
know,
support, a lot of support. Now
but
you
it's not easy. It's just
yeah,
not easy, and it's not meant to be.
yeah. And you know, I'm sure that you can attest to this too. It is you learn to become comfortable in the uncomfortable spaces.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's
And
a difference between, oh, I'm getting ready to get hit by a bus, uncomfortable, right? That's your survival instinct. And you know what? I need to push. I need to, or at least it doesn't mean you have to be aggressive all the time. I don't mean that. It just means I need to experience, I need to push my consciousness. I need to trust.
mhm.
I need to trust, and I need to keep expanding.
Yeah, my guides, one of my male guides comes in and he tells me do the hard things. So when I'm
I
feeling
love that.
that soul spark, that excitement, that giddiness that comes in, and you know, right, it hits me. I call it the Christ light is just below the rib cage, you know, right above the stomach.
Nice. Yep.
And when I get those, that little spark right there, that's when I know, okay, this is something aligning with this path. But then my ego comes in and I get nervous and my heart starts to flutter. Oh my goodness. And you think all the things. That's when my guide comes in and says, do the hard things because you're
Yeah.
feeling that excitement inside. So just,
There's, I will feel too. I'll feel the excitement, and then the resistance will kick in. Total resistance. I get grumpy and cantankerous. I'm like, why do I do this? Why did you make it? Why didn't I choose the easy path? But I
yeah.
have to go back to the excitement, because sometimes resistance will kick in for me, and it's really actually a no. It's like, no, you're doing this to please somebody else. You're doing this because you obligated yourself to something you shouldn't have done. And underneath it all, there's absolutely no excitement. But that excitement, that thrill, if that's there, and then my 3-year-old kicks in and throws temper tantrums, then I need to just like work through the temper tantrum.
So speaking of 3-year-old, you had mentioned that when you're 18, you saw this higher version of yourself. At what age did, we're just going to call it magic? When did that first enter into your life where you felt, oh, I might have something?
I'm the kid who never grew out of seeing imaginary friends who weren't imaginary to me. They were very real. So I saw my guides. I had my favorite aunt pass away right before I was 4 years old. And she visited me every night. Like I never grew out of a rock solid knowledge that the other world existed. What I did grow into as I got older was that sense of, not everybody sees this. Not everybody takes this for granted as being real. To me, the spirit world was very much as real as the grass and the trees outside. Super, like, never doubted that. I just didn't know as I was getting older what to do with it. And that sense of isolation that other people might have had active imaginations, and I had an active imagination, but this went beyond imagination. There was too much that was constantly real to me. There were too many spirit people that would come in that I would mistake for being flesh and blood still here incarnated. And that would go on kind of on and off throughout my life, including when I was practicing law. I remember when it was time for me to quit practicing law, my anxiety went really, really high. And the spirit world was just super, always, always there. Like I'd literally see somebody standing outside my 5th-story window in my office. So I'd be in a conference or on a conference table, my head would jerk because I'm like, why is there a man standing outside the 5th story? Like, why is he hanging out there? And I realized nobody else saw it. Or I'd be like, wow, somebody brought their dog into work today. There's a dog. And they're like, no. I'm like, no, there's a dog running down the hall. Whose dog is that? Like, yeah, no.
Yeah.
Just you. So, but that's when I realized that intrusiveness was telling me, girl, it's time. It is past time. It is time for you to turn your energy to something else. So I had to go all the way around the bend to really be like, okay, it's not just the spirit world's always there and that's going to be comforting to me and getting through life. It's okay, now I need to do something with this. I need to figure this out. And I remember sitting in my law firm, my very fancy law firm, with the constant threat that our computers and searches and everything were always like, nothing was private. And I was still Googling psychic mediumship, or I was Googling mediumship. Psychic medium wasn't really, psychics then were still like ladies in turbans looking at crystal balls. Like they weren't like evidence-based in my awareness. And I didn't know what evidence-based mediumship was, but I remember looking for mediums and finding nobody that seemed really grounded and serious. And after I quit practicing law and after I started really doing a deep dive historically on legends and folklore, which I had always loved, and really kind of developing my creative side, then all of a sudden the teachers appeared who were grounded and that really connected with me. But I had to do the work. I had to trust something's going on with the spirit world. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Maybe I'm supposed to write ghost stories. Maybe I'm supposed to write novels. Maybe historical factor people are coming in for me to tell their story. I had to go through all of that before the teachers appeared.
Yeah.
That was a long-winded answer to your
No,
question.
it's a beautiful answer. And I had something very similar for myself. I do believe, I want to say this is a medium's journey, or this is the witch's journey. At the end of it is always surrender. And
Yes.
you're surrendering to yourself. So
Yes.
when we say surrender, this is not about you've let loose of control of yourself, or you have no boundaries. That's not what we're talking about.
Correct.
We're talking about being cradled into your
Yeah.
soul person, purpose.
Yes. And I always feel like we're groomed, like groomed. I mean, that sounds, it's a bad word right now, but we are like led by our higher selves. There is a reason I had to go through law school and become a lawyer. I had to develop that side of my brain. I just had to. That was my journey. I had to experience that world for myself so I could come full circle.
Yeah. I picked journalism and television because I was always from a very young age searching for more. Oh,
Yes.
there's so much
Yes.
more to this world because I was
Yes.
seeing so much more. And
Yes.
I mean, I was a kid that I never shut up at school. So everything that I was reading, I shared ad nauseum with all of my
Wow.
classmates. And whether I was going into Egypt and learning about the pharaohs or learning, I was telling ghost stories because I had ghosts in my house. I talked
Yeah.
about aliens because I saw UFO. I had experiences.
Yeah.
So I was always searching. And so in my rational mind, okay, I'm going to become a journalist because then I can search for a living and get paid
And
to and
tell people about it.
tell people about
That's
it. Correct.
phenomenal.
And
I,
so like you, I ended up I was working for developing a show for the Travel Channel.
yeah,
Um and from the modern world you think, oh wow, dream job, right? I had always wanted
right.
that. And but I still wasn't happy.
Mm-hmm.
I felt every day I was working on that, it was another day, it was time I didn't have to search just like you for more
Yes.
into the energy work, more into the spirit world, more into
Yeah.
ufology. And so when that show, it ended up losing funding. So that was my key. Okay, I'm finally going to surrender into this.
Yeah.
And again, it is the work. And I let go and I told my guides, okay, I'm going to commit to this. And it's the 50-50. I'll do the work each day. I'll walk out the door each day and commit and say yes when I have that soul spark, but you'll line it up for me. You'll line up.
Yeah. Nice.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. I want to say, because this is dropping in my head to say that you and I have certain stories. There are so many other ways to come this path. There are plenty of other people that will literally, we have I think it's somebody we know mutually who was well on his path. I think he's in his 40s and he literally just had an awakening one day. Just waking up on the massage table. Oh, heck, wait, there's more going on here. So there's no wrong or right way for this journey. So if your journey is like literally all of a sudden you feel like you just woke up one day or that you're still searching for that, that's normal. It's all normal. There, it's all like, it's all great. I always want to tell people you don't have to have like an ancestral line. You might, that you don't know about,
Yeah.
but it's certainly not a requirement. There are no requirements to finding your soul other
Yeah.
than to do it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Um and there is no right or wrong way to this. There are no boxes within this. And
Right.
we only use labels because it's just a broadly accepted, but there aren't even labels to any of this. It
Right.
really is just the sole purpose of I need to use a voice. I need to help others. It's a strong need to show others there is a connection to things outside of
Yes.
what's understood in society.
Yeah.
And just how we started the show off, this has been there since the very beginning. We've always had this isn't a new concept
Right.
um, that just sprung up in the 1600s, because most
Right.
people go back to that age for the witch trials, and no, this has always been there.
And
So
those women and men did not get persecuted for nothing. Their
correct.
lives mean something. I feel like that's a part of the ancestry. Like, I don't want to let them down.
And honestly, that's the reason why I'm doing this podcast. It's to show it was not for nothing.
It's not for
we're
nothing.
we're still here. The
Yeah.
souls come back, the souls return. I joke to you in your office and I say, well, what's the worst thing they're gonna do, kill us or just come back
I'll be back. I'm coming back.
Absolutely. So I would love, I had said that you're an evidential mediumship. For those that listening, what is the difference? Because aren't all mediums just mediums? What is evidential mediumship?
Um, I'll give you a two-part answer. I'm such a lawyer. I can't answer anything straight up. I think evidence-based mediumship is when you're bringing in a being that is giving evidence of their life, some characteristic of their life that you can actually recognize them. Or they're giving, if a guide is coming in, they're giving evidence of the recipient's life, the client's life, so that it's like anchoring into some practical fact. But there's certainly a whole lot of value in, let's say, an angel or Mother Mary or one of the great guides, but in my experience, they're still going to give evidence of the person's life. They're going to say, I know this is what you're struggling with. I know blah, 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 blah. The other part of that, the other way to do that, there are some wonderful people out there who just simply it's not simple at all, but they channel. So they're channeling a message, or they might channel like a life situation and a message and wisdom out of it. And it might not exactly be evidence-based in your own life, but it's really ringing true. I mean, actually think about all of our great songwriters. I'm a great songwriter. You get like millions of people listen to the same lyrics and you're like, that is hitting me. Like, man, that song is in my head. That is a message for me. I think that could be mediumship driven. So that's what I think is a difference. So I tend to be more on the evidence-based side. So I would say, I've got your grandmother, your grandfather here, I give some relationship, and then enough characteristics about that soul that person is like, yeah, that's my grandma. Yeah, that's my dog. That was my cat, whatever that is, that they can actually recognize that that's the being I'm talking to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I've definitely had the angelic realm and Mother Mary particularly come in, and they come in with such significant vibrational characteristics. They come in with evidence of what's going on in my client's life. And always that client, unbeknownst to me ahead of time, already felt like they had a special draw to Mother Mary, or a draw to that angelic being. And so for that being to show up in the sitting, that's evidence for them. Does that make sense?
It makes complete sense. Yes.
So
Yeah. It's, it's evidence. Evidential mediumship is really great for the sitter, and the sitter is just your client who comes in, who might have a little bit of skepticism within them, where they were drawn to come and do a reading. They're really wanting to connect, but they just need a little bit more of those evidentiary facts coming in. So you can say, I have grandmother. Her name was Mary. She's showing me she died of a heart attack. She's showing me that she worked at the grocery store. Is this resonating with you? And they're like, yeah, my grandmother was named Mary. She worked at the grocery store for 40 years and loved her job. And
I know that's my grandmother then, and it's not my aunt or my whatever. And a lot of people, I think evidence is helpful when you have, for lack of a better word, a lot of dead people, when you have a lot of people in spirit. So I have a lot of people in spirit. So I'm not always going to know if I'm getting a sitting, who that, who it is coming in, unless the reader gives me enough that I'm like, oh, okay, it's that person, because there's just so many over there, which is fine. But I will tell people too, evidence is not an exact science. It's not like we're picking up the phone, and we're not in control of the evidence they give. So we don't get to depose them on the other side. It's not a deposition. It's not an interrogation. We don't get to say, hey, yo, Granny, what you did, tell me this, tell me that, tell me that. They're going to give what's needed in that moment to then deliver the message they need to their loved ones. So you can't come in thinking, I want this person in, I want them to tell me this, and what's the password to the laptop you left me? Like, hire a hacker for that. They're not necessarily going to give you that. So that's part of the ego and surrender too. You got to work around, because a lot of clients will come in with a real strong demand, and you got to come in with a sense of being open to what the spirit world is going to give you, because their wisdom and perspective is, remember, it's a lot broader than ours is in current form.
I did a practice. Once, and it was the point of the practice was to show the difficulty from spirit to communicate with us. And the practice was, you had to spend 6 hours of your day and not say a word, but you had to still go about your normal day-to-day life, and you had to figure out how to communicate with people. And I did it. And you know what? By the last 2 hours, I had tears in my eyes, because I realized this is so difficult.
Yeah.
And you have to find, the complete stranger at the breakfast restaurant. How are we going to find a common language here so that she can understand that I'm wanting an egg and cheese bagel and I want it on sesame seed, not rosemary. How am I going to get that? And that is what it's like for the medium sitting there. We're trying to find, whether it's through exact words, symbols, pictures,
impression, just because most of mediumship with spirit is just an impression.
Yep. Yeah. And then how are we going to bring all that through our physical body and then translate that to this person sitting in front of us?
That's phenomenal. You're reminding me. I have a friend actually who does that on every solstice. She goes 24 hours without speaking. She
Yeah.
will write, like she'll write sticky notes if she needs to. But she'll do that just to remind herself the power of language.
Mm-hmm. It is the power. Oh, wow. Yeah. Semantics, power of
Mm-hmm.
language. Yes. And understanding semantics too, how you may say one phrase, and another person says the same exact phrase, but there's two different meanings to that. And so we're also dealing with that type of barrier as well.
Right. Right.
So yeah, it is an interesting journey. And if we want to go back and look at some historical stories, really at the base of a lot of them, they were just trying to communicate something.
Yeah. We'll
Communicate.
go back to the story that we started with. If you think like what sparked that young woman to be so adamant that what was happening to her was not right. And she needed to stand up, not just for herself, but for a complete common practice of the era. And that she was refused to get just kicked out in the street without a job. And it's to call attention that if you do that to somebody, it's wrong.
Yeah.
What in her? Because how many other women and men just got fired or thrown out in the street willy-nilly with no job security, no roof over the head, no nothing, and finding another job was really difficult.
Mm-hmm.
So she could have though left and said, oh, I used to work for Mr. So and so, I've got a great reference. She could have not rocked the boat,
Yeah.
and probably the wife of the house would have given her a reference to
Yeah.
go forward and keep her mouth shut. So what in her said, I've got to stand up for this. This isn't right.
Yeah.
Talk about communication and bravery behind it. Woo.
Absolutely. I mean, and if you want to translate that into our modern era now, we're actually seeing modern witch trials left and
For
right now.
sure.
We're just not
Yeah.
calling them that. All
Right.
the people when the mainstream has decided we don't like this person anymore, so we're going to go ahead and ruin their lives.
We're gonna cancel them.
We're going
Yeah.
to cancel them. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
And it's the guilty until proven innocent. And we're
Yeah.
we're seeing that. It is modern day witch trials. It's just there just aren't platforms and fires anymore. They're
Right.
just people losing their entire life's work, losing
Yeah.
family members, getting harassed, people showing up at their house, having credentials they've worked their lifetime for getting taken away from them. So it just it shifts and molds, and really at the root of all of it is fear
Right.
and nonconformity.
Right.
And so, with your story, he was afraid of being found out.
Right.
Let's just let's rid the city of her. Just shut her up.
Yep. And make an example out of her. If she's not gonna shut up, we're gonna make an example out of her.
Absolutely, absolutely. And in so many of those trials that we saw over in Europe, oh, and that's when they started to group people. Let's do the
Yeah.
group trials of
Right.
10 to 7. There was one trial in Scotland had 70 people in one trial.
Jeez. Ay, ay, ay.
Yes. Yeah.
Well,
And
think of the great artists. Actually, this is just coming to me who got canceled in real life. Like Edgar Allan Poe is the one coming to me.
yeah.
And it wasn't because he wasn't brilliant. It wasn't a brilliant storyteller. It's because those in power actually said, oh, his stories aren't any good.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. He had a ongoing letter writing campaign with William Gilmore Simms, who was a very famous Charlestonian, but he was an advocate for slavery. And so after the Civil War, he all of his works were literally taken off the shelf. So a lot of the good works were also taken off the shelf. And Edgar Allan Poe, I think it said he wrote one of the best ghost stories ever written, gone, because of his belief. But then Edgar Allan Poe is the one after death, after his detractors had passed away or had been taken out of power, his stories could flourish and stand the test of time.
Yeah.
And that's true with a lot of artists and writers.
A lot of artists, they never experienced any of their acclaim. that we're seeing now. Yeah. Yeah.
So keep doing the hard things,
Yes.
everybody. Keep showing up.
And,
We promise that it matters. It matters. Your work matters, even if
yes.
you're not seeing it immediately in your lifetime.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we discussed, this show, we mainly focused on mediumship, but, you're psychic as well. And psychic, all that really means for everyone at home, it's just intuition. It's just feeling. It's feeling in your body. It's a broadly accepted term to say a mother's intuition, a woman's intuition. Nobody scoffs at that. But at the minute you put it psychic,
Yeah.
just like you said, like the crystal balls, and, you see that. I'll tell everyone I have a crystal ball story. So I actually went and bought a very small one, mainly just, I'll just have a crystal ball, tongue in cheek, eye wink. And I put it in my car to drive
Oh
home.
God.
And
I know where this is going because I have a similar story. Go ahead. Go ahead.
in less than a minute, I start to see smoke coming up because
Yep.
the sun had hit the
Yep.
ball at just the right angle, and it
Yep.
burnt a hole in my passenger seat of my car.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a crystal ball too. I love my crystal ball. I haven't used it to look into it to see. Most people think psychic is looking into the future. That's not always
Yeah.
what it is. You're just looking at your
Possible timelines.
possible timelines, right? But
Yeah.
I, in my infinite wisdom, put my crystal ball on the windowsill. And then after a while, I noticed that the drapes had burn marks in them. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to burn the house down. Now, this is not the way this witch needs to burn in this lifetime. Let me just tell you. So, pro tip, which is don't keep your crystal ball in direct sunlight because yeah, they actually work. It's true.
Yes.
You'll burn something.
It absolutely does work. I joked, well, is this the true sign of a witch that you have a burn mark somewhere
Yeah.
from your crystal ball?
I love the word witch, and my husband is Estonian, and he in his culture, which is very pagan and very openly pagan all the way around, with a lot of lifestyle things. But witches mean you're a witch of any ability that's what should I say, supernatural, paranormal, something like that. So some people are more plant witches. Some people can literally make any plant grow out of nothing. Some people are healers and they really know how to put plants together, how to heal. Like I definitely feel, Abby, that you've got you're much more, you're so on the spectrum of healer in a different way than I am. Mine comes differently. Other people are more psychic. Other people are more psychic to the earth. Like they know when an earthquake is coming. They know when a storm is coming. So they know when it's going to be a bad winter. You need to gather up more food or you need to leave the coast. That's all real. Other people are more medium oriented. Other people are more, there's so many different ways to skin this cat. To use a bad phrase
Yeah.
there. But my husband and his culture, they use witch for all of it.
Yeah.
So it's just like, what path are you pulled down?
Yeah. And it's how you alchemize energy. Really.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And what's going to be the most natural for you.
Yeah.
And then
And
also going to be the hardest for you to step out with. Yeah.
yeah. And I think it's natural, they're in a coven. Why is there always a group of women over there? And it's exactly why you explained, because one is really good at alchemizing the air, and one is good at alchemizing the earth, and one is seeing future timelines, and one is bringing up things from the past that we can learn.
Yes.
And that's why we come in groups, because everyone has a little
A
piece
different talent, little piece of it. Some people are good with birthing babies. Some people are really good with bringing souls in the world. Some people are good with animals. Some people are good with taking souls out of the world, which is what I'm comfortable with in mediumship. But yeah, that's everybody's got their own jam.
That's really coming in. A lot of very gifted mediums and witches, for the point of the show, they're all really being drawn towards bringing up the concept and the idea of being a death doula.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I feel like that is a part that's been lacking in our society for so long. And that's probably because I've lost people at such an early age and watched how society responded to certain types of deaths, like suicide or certain tragedies. And it's just because people aren't comfortable with the notion of death on any level. And yeah, the idea of a death doula hospice, coming up in the last decades is really making people comfortable with crossing over. It's so needed. It's so needed.
And hospice care is very, very, very open to this
Totally.
because they've
Yep.
seen, they've experienced it.
Yep.
They've seen how thin and or non-existent the veil is in those end of
Yeah.
days.
Yeah. And how healing it can be. What a gift.
Yes.
If this is what you're pulled to, what a gift it can be when you're with somebody in those last minutes
Absolutely.
and those last days. It's a huge gift. It's not for everybody, which is totally fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the when the soul enters the body and the pregnant woman is surrounded by all of those people to help bring the soul in. It should be surrounded in helping the soul to exit, to transition.
Right. Both ways, both ends.
Yeah. Yep. It's all beautiful. It's a beautiful practice. It's a gift.
It's all miraculous.
It's service to others. There's no fear within this. It's surrendering into the heart space. And it's that human connection.
Yeah.
And so, we're here to bring down the illusion of it.
Yes. Right.
Yeah,
So you
absolutely.
can live your everyday life here on earth as fully as you can possibly imagine it to be, because that's what it's all about in this moment.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And to close out, these are the ending thoughts. The ashes going higher, the smoke filling the sky. Oh, you didn't see my ancestors coming for me behind. As you light the flame of fear, burning away the inner voice rumbling near. Oh, you thought turning us to dust. We lay in the ground, burying your lust. But a fire burns in our blood, memories drum through our veins. We are the burnt witches returned, the ones you thought you burned away. Let our voices rise together and echo from a deep place you know. Our hearts, they do not tremble. We've come to awaken and help you grow. Thank you for tuning in to Burnt Witches. Andrea, thank you so much for being here. How can everyone find you at home? And what was the name of your travel channel show?
The Travel Channel show was True Terror with Robert England, and it was about that intersection between legends and fact. So they would take a legend and see what the facts were behind it. Very cool, very my sweet spot. But people can find me on my website, which is www.andreasaintamand.com, and the Saint is spelled out, so it's AndreaSaintamand.com.
Thank you so very much. Thank you for bringing your voice and for helping others and working through working through all of those. We're going to say shining in the uncomfortable. That's what you do.
Thank you. Thank you for being with me on this journey, Abby.
Absolutely. And for everyone at home, stay tuned for the next episode of Burnt Witches. To re-listen to today's episode or to catch any other shows, please go to host Abby Lynn's website at abbylynn.co, where you can also find merchandise and other recordings. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you around the fire for the next one.